The desert evening was bleeding gold into rust when the wind began to whisper her name. Mae Delaney. The sound of it once meant laughter and sunlight through barn dust. Now it only carried pain. She moved barefoot through the dirt yard of Iron Tooth Ranch, wrists swollen from rope, hair tangled like tumbleweed. The men called her names that stung worse than the lash, each one meant to remind her she wasn't human anymore. Horse's plaything, they said, laughing, spitting, drinking. Each cruel word turned the sunset darker. From a distance, a lone rider paused on the ridge, his silhouette sharp against the dying light. Silas Boone, a drifter with a scar down his cheek, eyes the color of storm clouds. He watched her for a long time, saying nothing, his face unreadable. The laughter carried through the wind, and he turned his horse away, telling himself it wasn't his business. He had made promises before, broken them too. He'd seen a woman beg for help once years ago, and the memory haunted his sleep. So he rode on, but the sound of her whisper, "Please let me go," followed him into the night. He camped near the dry riverbed. The fire crackled softly as he fed it twigs, pretending not to remember. But when he closed his eyes, he saw her face, the hollow eyes, the way her lips trembled, but no tears came. His hand clenched around the canteen until the leather creaked. "Not again," he muttered to the dark. The wind answered with the same cry of the horses from Iron Tooth, and he knew he wouldn't sleep. Dawn came slow and heavy, the horizon glowing faintly pink. Silas kicked dirt over his fire, mounted his horse, and turned back toward the ranch he'd promised to leave behind. When he rode in that morning, the men were still half drunk. Their laughter was lazy, their cruelty casual. Mae was tied near the stable post, her head bowed, the rope cutting into her skin. The ranch owner, Jed Holler, noticed the stranger and smirked. "You lost, Drifter?" he asked. "Or you come to buy what's been used?" The others laughed. Silas didn't answer. He dismounted quietly, the dust swirling around his boots. He looked at the girl, then the rope, then back at the men. "You call yourselves cowboys," he said softly, voice calm as a blade sliding from its sheath. "But you don't even know what a horse is for." They didn't understand at first, until he moved. It wasn't loud. It wasn't fast. Just precise. A backhand across one man's jaw, a knife flicking through the rope, the heavy silence after. Mae's body sagged forward into his arms, her breath shallow. One of the men went for his gun. Silas turned, shot once, the bullet hitting the dirt near his boot, enough to make him drop it. The others froze. The wind itself seemed to hold its breath. "You can tell Holler," Silas said, lifting Mae onto his horse, "that the next chain he ties, he'd better wear himself." As they galloped from the ranch, Mae barely spoke. Her fingers clutched the saddle horn, her eyes fixed on the blur of desert stretching endlessly ahead. The world whipped by, wild and unkind, but for the first time in a long while, she wasn't tied to anything. Her voice came out broken. "Please, just let me go." Silas's answer came low, almost tender. "You're already gone from there, miss. That's enough for tonight." They rode until the sun fell again, until the world softened into blues and silver shadows. He stopped near a riverbed and helped her down. She could barely stand. He gave her water first, then started a small fire. The flames painted her face in trembling light, bruised, dirt-streaked, but still carrying something quiet and fierce beneath the pain. He didn't ask her story. She didn't offer it. He cooked beans, pushed the tin toward her, then leaned back against a rock. Silence settled between them, heavy but safe. After a long while, her voice broke through the crackle of fire. "Why did you do it?" she asked. Silas stared into the flames. "Because once nobody did it for me." The answer hung there, simple and raw. She looked at him differently after that, not like a savior, but like a man who'd been broken in the same shape she was. He handed her his jacket when the night wind turned cold. She hesitated, then took it, wrapping herself tight. He didn't look at her when she whispered, "Thank you." He just nodded, eyes still on the fire, like he was afraid if he looked too long, he'd start to care too much. Back in town, gossip moved faster than dust. "That drifter stole Holler's girl," they said. "Took her into the hills." But those who saw Holler's eyes when he spoke her name knew better. Some men didn't own land, they owned cruelty. and cruelty leaves witnesses. Days passed like dreams. Silas and Mae moved between canyons, resting by streams, speaking little. Sometimes she'd wake in the night, crying out, and he'd hum an old song, low and rough, a tune from before the war. She'd listen until her breathing slowed. He didn't know her full story, but he didn't need to. Pain recognizes its own kind. The moment she started smiling again was small. He was fixing a broken stirrup, cursing under his breath. She laughed, a quiet, cracked laugh that startled them both. "Guess you ain't good at everything," she said. He looked up, and for a second, it felt like sunrise between them. But peace doesn't last long on the frontier. One morning, Silas saw dust clouds on the horizon. Riders. Holler's men. Mae froze when she saw them too. Her hands began to tremble. He put a hand on her shoulder. "Stay behind me," he said softly. The posse reached the canyon's mouth by dawn. Holler was there, his grin wide and hateful. "You think you can take what's mine, Boone?" he called out. Silas stepped forward, revolver hanging loose at his side. "No man owns what he broke," he said. The wind picked up, whistling through the rocks. Mae stood behind him, clutching the blanket to her chest, her heart pounding like thunder. The standoff stretched thin as glass. Holler raised his gun. Silas fired first. One shot. The sound echoed off the stone walls. Holler's horse reared, throwing him down. Silence fell like snow. The other men hesitated, then turned their mounts and rode off, leaving the body in the dust. For a long time, neither Mae nor Silas moved. The smell of gunpowder hung between them, sharp and final. Then Mae stepped forward, staring at the man who had owned her pain. She didn't cry. She just knelt, untied the last strip of rope still hanging from her wrist, and let it fall into the river. The current caught it, carried it downstream until it disappeared. Silas watched her in silence, his hand still trembling from the shot. "You could have run," she said finally, voice quiet. "Why'd you stay?" He holstered his gun. "Because running don't change what you carry." She looked at him for a long time, eyes glistening. Then she reached out, touching the frayed edge of his sleeve. A small gesture. A thank you. A promise. They buried Holler in the canyon. No word said. The sky turned soft pink again, like the one she saw the night she was freed. They rode together after that, heading west. No plan. Just two souls who'd been carved hollow and were learning, slowly, how to fill again. When the next town whispered about them, they said the drifter and the broken girl kept to themselves. They didn't know her name, only that she worked at the stables, humming when she brushed the horses. They didn't know his story, only that he never went anywhere without glancing at the horizon, as if listening for something long gone. Sometimes, when the sun dipped low and the sky caught fire, Mae would stand outside, watching the wind move through the grass. She'd close her eyes, hear the clinking of chains only in memory. And Silas would be somewhere nearby, whittling wood or fixing a saddle, pretending not to notice how she smiled now. The kind of smile that could stop a man's breath and start his soul again. One evening, she said, almost to herself, "I thought I'd never belong anywhere again." Silas looked up from his work. "Maybe you don't have to belong," he said. "Maybe you just got to be free." The light faded slow. The first stars blinked awake, shy and patient. They didn't touch, didn't speak again. But something passed between them, a quiet understanding, like a prayer said, without words. Years later, the story of Mae Delaney and the drifter who cut her chains became legend in those parts. Folks told it different ways. Some said he was a ghost, others said he died that day in the canyon, and she dreamed the rest. But if you stand by the river at dusk, you can still hear the sound of a rope snapping and a woman's breath catching like the start of a new life. And maybe that's the truth of it. Maybe freedom ain't something you take. Maybe it's something you give back to yourself. Out here, the desert remembers everything. The cruelty, the mercy, the moments in between. Some folks break bones. Others break spirits. But every now and then, someone comes along who just listens. Someone who stays. So if you ever find yourself bound by what they called you, by what they took, by what you let them make you believe, remember Mae Delaney. She wasn't freed by luck or pity. She was freed by grace, and a man who chose to stay when it would have been easier to ride away. And maybe, when the night turns still and the wind moves through the sage, you'll hear her voice in it too, soft, steady, alive, whispering to the ones still tied down, "Please let me go." Because sometimes the strongest sound in this whole cruel world isn't a gunshot. It's the sound of chains hitting the dirt.